All right, so the next stage is circumscribing, which is pretty much communication between the members decrease in quantity and quality, restrictions and restraints are starting to happen, and then shrinking of interest and commitment to each other. Obviously, at this point, you can see that sometimes that doesn't actually happen in relationships, whether it's romantic, just platonic friendships. You sometimes don't get to that stage at all, or sometimes you do, but then you go back and recircle back and you don't get to the next stage. We'll talk about that more in a second though. So this is that stage where communication is kind of just dropping off, and the communication you are having isn't really as the same quality as you were having before. And then there's stagnating, where no growth in your friendship, relationship, whatever is occurring. Relationship boredom sets in. You're just bored with each other. You don't really care if you see them or don't. And then avoiding. You begin to create physical distance between each other. Your relationship is deteriorating, and you don't really, it's awkward when you try to force that relationship to work and you're not taking those steps to rebuild it, or you just don't want to rebuild it. It's not a friendship that's worthwhile to you anymore, so you're avoiding them. And then finally it gets to that terminating stage where you're just ending the relationship. But then there's that term called grave dressing, and grave dressing is pretty much retrospective attempts to explain why the relationship failed. So looking back at the relationship and thinking, geez, why did this fail? Why didn't this work out? And you're trying to see what went wrong, which is actually a good thing to have or do, because maybe that can help you with future relationships. This went wrong in this relationship, and there's really no fixing this relationship anymore. It's over, and we can't go back to the way things were, even though we know what went wrong. But I can fix this in my future relationship, so that same thing doesn't happen again. All right, and then, the limitations of the developmental perspective. So what are the limitations of this theory? Well, it's too heavy a focus on sequential movement from one stage to the next, and it ignores the idea that multiple stages may exist simultaneously. So it's saying, well, this happens and this happens and this happens. Well, sometimes you go back and forth between those stages, and sometimes you skipped a couple stages too. So it's very sequential, and it doesn't have a lot of room for negotiating that some of these stages happen in different orders and some of these stages don't happen at all, or sometimes we do a circular kind of motion with these stages, which is actually fixed in the next one that we'll kind of talk about. And then ignores the idea that multiple stages may exist simultaneously. So some of these stages could happen at the same time, or you're going through them at the same time. And it's pretty much saying that, no, you have to do this, this, and this is how it happens. Well, no, that's not quite how relationships work. Especially relationships that you're desperate to save and you're trying to renew, because sometimes you start all over again in a friendship or a romantic relationship and you start those stages over again, or you go into a circular pattern. And this developmental perspective kind of ignores that aspect of relationships. All right, so that is the dialectical perspective, and that perspective goes on to the three types of dialectical tensions, and those tensions are the conflicts that arise when two opposing or incompatible forces exist simultaneously. So, the three are connection autonomy dialectic, openness privacy dialectic, and predictability novelty dialectic. So the first one, the connection versus autonomy, is the conflicting desires for both dependence and independence. And the whole point of these tensions is that if you can get them, if you can get these tensions or overcome these tensions, then your relationship is probably strong and probably will work out for the best as long as you are balancing these tensions. So connection autonomy, that's wanting to be close to someone, but also wanting your own personal identity. And we see this in the steps before, how once you get into that committed relationship, you still want a me identity, an I identity, versus a we identity. So as long as you can balance that and you're spending, time together, but you're also understanding that you need time apart, that can make a relationship work. So as long as you're not creating a tension between and you're making it cooperative, then it should make the relationship work. And that goes the same for the other two, which is the next one is openness, privacy. So the fact that you want to disclose information, you want to be open with the people you're in a relationship with, but at the same time, you want to keep some personal information and space between your personal life and others. Even when you're in a romantic relationship with them, there's some things that you just don't want to share, and that's totally okay. And even expected. So honestly, it's about forming those relationships and saying, hey, I'll be pretty open to you with you about a lot of things, but there's some things I just don't want to talk about. And that understanding can help relationships form and create and stay strong. And then the last one, predictability versus novelty. So the desire to have a stable or predictable relationship, but also wanting to have that excitement, that novelty of a relationship, of something different every once in a while, just to keep the relationship fresh and exciting. Again, perfectly normal. Though some people like to stay stable 100% of the time, they don't like change. Those are the kind of people who probably should be with other people who are like-minded, who want that never changing, nothing exciting, just because they don't like change and change scares them. But yeah, most relationships, while they like the stability of, having a place to go home with and never having to worry about, major disasters happening for the most part, they also like that little excitement of, being surprised and trying something different. It just keeps the relationships fresh and new and exciting and less boring. Okay, so then we go into the managing the dialectical tensions. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these managements of how we usually deal with these dialectical tensions. There's denial, disorientation, alternation, segmentation, balance, integration, recalibration, and reaffirmation. So sorry, these are some of my sticky notes blocked my notes, which I know sounds weird. So denial. With the strategy, communicators respond to one end of the dialectical spectrum and ignore the other. For example, a couple caught between conflicting desires for predictability and novelty might find their struggle for change too difficult to manage and choose to follow predictable, if unexciting patterns of relating to each other. So just pretty much ignoring that they have different ideas of how their relationship should be formed. Disorientation. The communicators feel so overwhelmed and helpless that they are unable to confront their problems. They might fight, freeze, or even leave the relationship. So they get scared, they dissociate with it. They try to, it's kind of like denial, but at the same time, they just okay, I can fight, I can freeze, or I can leave this relationship. Those are the only three options. It's kind of the fight or flight strategy. And then there's alternation. So the communicators are choosing, who choose this strategy, choose one end of the dialectical spectrum at some times and then the other at other times. For example, friends might manage the connection autonomy dialect by alternating between times when they spend a large amount of time together and other times when they live independent lives. Friendships are pretty much based on this, especially after you get past the high school stage and you guys go off to different colleges. A lot of friendships turn into this. You know, there's times when you hang out with them, and then there's times you hang out with your other friends that you've made outside of this relationship. I find this a very healthy way to deal with these tensions, by the way. And then there's segmentation. Partners who use this tactic compartmentalize different areas of their relationship. For example, a couple might manage the openness, privacy dialectic by sharing almost all their feelings about mutual friends with each other, but keeping certain parts of their past romantic histories private. So they pick and choose, kind of. It's like a pick and choose. Well, I'll share this, everything you want to know about this part of my life, but I won't share this part of my life with you. So it's like the picking, it's, as I said, it's the picking and choosing of what to share and what not to share, or when to hang out, when not to hang out, or when to be predictable and when to plan novelty, I guess. Which I know sounds, if you're planning novelty, is it really novelty? Well, it can be. Kind of like planned vacations or something. Okay. And then there's balance, where communicators who try to balance dialectical tensions recognize that both forces are legitimate and try to manage them through compromise. So this is all about compromising, which I talked about before, that to create, this is probably the biggest and most heavily used for healthy relationships, is compromising. Relationships are all about compromising. Okay, we'll do this for you, but then we're doing this for me. Or we'll do this first, but then we're going to do this. Or we'll go vacation here this summer, but then I want to spend Christmas with my family. Compromise, you know. And then integration, which is this strategy, communicators simultaneously accept opposing forces without trying to diminish them. So it's when the couple, whether romantic or friendship, accept the need for both the predictability and the novelty, and the together time and the apart time. They accept both, and they know that they need both. So they manage their time appropriately with doing both. This is a lot about, this is very comparative to the alternation example as well. And then recalibration, which is communicators can respond to dialectical challenges by reframing them so that the apparent contradiction disappears. For example, a change in thinking can transform your attitude from loving someone despite your differences to loving him or her because of those differences. Or consider how two people who each felt hurt by each other's unwillingness to share parts of his or her past might redefine the secrets to create an attractive aura of mystery instead of seeing them as a problem to be solved. So kind of just saying, okay, yeah, I considered this a problem at one point, but if I look at it from a different perspective, it's not really a problem. So it's looking at things from a different angle, usually from the angle of your partner or your friend or so on and so forth, seeing it from their side. And then reaffirmation. That's the strategy that acknowledges that dialectical tensions will never disappear. Pretty much saying that these tensions are never going to disappear, which is very logical. They aren't going to disappear. They're always going to be there. So instead of trying to push them away and make them go away, accept that they are there, embrace them, and then go through these challenges together despite these tensions. Go through these challenges of these tensions together and fight through them, because they're never going to really disappear. All right. So this video is again and again. So we'll finish up this PowerPoint in part 3. Stay tuned.